time. Yeah, this is tea time. Yeah, making a difference, one cup at a time. Tea time. So be sure to grab your tea, grab a seat, and tune in to Miss Liz. Tea time, making a difference, one cup at a time. Tea time, yeah. Tea time, time.
Well, welcome everybody, and it is afternoon tea time. Yes, we are 1 hour if anyone is paying attention. And you know what? Life happens sometimes, but you know what? I think it needed to happen because the guest that I have sitting in the background is the leadership. And you know, if you don't communicate and have good communication skills with your guests, sometimes things happen and we need to have that communication. So again, Judy is in the background, Judy Ryan. And you know what? I think I needed that extra hour too of break because yesterday was so huge with the birthday and the book launch and all that good stuff. So I really want to thank Judy for being, me and Judy communicating and getting it figured out. And she is here. So we are doing our tea time 1 hour a little later. But you know what? Sometimes we got to just go off schedule. We were talking about that this morning with Monique. Sometimes you got to take that bend in the road and you got to just go a different way. So we are going to do all of the good stuff, disclaimer and bio and all that good stuff. And then we're going to get Judy in here and we're going to get her to share a good, strong TEA with you. That's right. We serve a different type of tea at Tea Time with Miss Liz. We don't serve the beverage. We serve life stories. We serve life organizations and foundations and all those incredible things, individuals who actually make a difference, and they are strong teas. And that's what Miss Liz does, is bring strong tea to the table. So we're going to start with the disclaimer and then the bio, and then we're going to jump in. We're going to get Judy in here, and then Miss Liz is going to sit back and sip on some tea while she shares a little bit about what she does. Disclaimer for Miss Liz's Tea Time live show. Miss Liz, myself, is going live using StreamYard. Before leaving a comment, please grant StreamYard permission to see your name at StreamYard.com. Please be advised that the content brought forward for any Tea Time show hosted by myself, Miss Liz, is always brought forward in good faith. However, may bring forward dialogues and opinions that are not representative of my platform. The facts and information are perceived to be accurate at the given time of airing. All Tea Time guests and audience participants are responsible for using their good judgment in taking any action that may relate to the discussion. The content brought forward may include discussions for some where they may be emotionally at risk. It is significant to know that this show is engaging in discussion forums only to offer and inspire awareness and connection and is not providing therapeutical advice. If you have any questions about the disclaimer or the panelist discussion, you may freely contact me, Miss Liz, through my email at bookingmissliz@gmail.com. Moving forward, should you choose to voluntarily participate in today's show in any aspect, I myself, Miss Liz, welcomes you. And should you decide that the show is not made for you at this time, I respect that, and I will see you at a later show at a later date and time. And again, all tea times are on Thursday this year for 2023. Unless it's a rescheduled tea time, then it's Monday or Tuesday. So now let's get into who Judy Ryan is. Well, Judy Ryan has been the CEO of LifeWork Systems, a company specialized in culture transformation and employees' engagements and performance since 2002. She's an award-winning author, columnist, consultant, trainer, and conference presenter. She is frequently interviewed on television, radio, and podcasts. She is the best known for her development of a digital, scalable, sustainable culture transformation system and implementation framework. Judy's mission is to create a world in which all people love their lives. So let's get Judy in here and let me sip on some tea. And I wouldn't want to say that 5 times fast, that all those supplements and I was like, what
Yeah.
is this? A tongue
It's
twister?
exactly, it's a mouthful, isn't it?
And I like to ramble when I'm really excited about a guest. I like to ramble. Like I just get really excited and then my tongue gets ahead of itself. And I'm just like, okay, I'm reading this and this is starting to sound like a tongue twister here. But welcome, Judy. It is an honor to have you here.
Same here, Liz. Thank you so much. And I already have your T word, which is thoughtful. I feel it right away from you.
Well, thank you so much. It is an honor. And sometimes we just got to take that moment to understand that life happens, and time zones and everything. Like we're working around the world here. We're not just
Mhm.
in one country, we're in different countries and different time zones. So my guests sometimes will say, oh, well, it's 3 o'clock my time. No, it's 3 o'clock my time. And we
Exactly.
don't realize we have that time change because we're going with our time zones. So,
Yes.
and I think we needed it. We really needed it. It
Yeah.
gave me
And then it
some
could
time.
also just be Mercury in retrograde, which completely screws up communications.
Right, but I really feel that communications is part of being a good leader. If you don't have that communication skills, then it's not a good platform to have.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. In fact, one of my core values is over communication so that everybody gains understanding. So
Yeah.
I'm with you on that.
So Judy, let's go way back. So who's the little Judy and who's the big Judy?
Oh gosh, the little Judy is still alive and well. But I'm assuming you mean how did I get started? Is that what
Yes.
you're saying, Liz? Okay.
Yeah.
I think I have always kind of had this probably this path in me because I remember one of my earliest memories was when I went from one school to another school, and I was actually being bullied in the school that I was in. And I remember trying very hard to fit in and do things that I thought people wanted from me. And I realized when I was starting a new school, no more of that. It's too stressful. It doesn't feel right for me. I'm going to go into this new school and I'm going to be completely myself, and the chips will fall where they do. And I remember when I first went to the new school and I was authentic and I kind of expected the sky to fall. And what happened instead is it was one of the best years of my life. And I think part of my mission to create a world in which all people love their lives, it's not only love your life, love their lives. In other words, the life we're here to live, not what someone else is trying to pressure in us or what we think we have to do to please other people. And so that's a big part of little Judy, is how do we help ourselves move more and more into the truly authentic people that we are? Not always easy.
Right, because we have so many bugs in our ears that are, you should do this, you should do that, and then when you try to explain, but that's not me, we really just got to start accepting people for who they are. And some people take a different trail than you do, or take a little longer to get to where you think that they should be.
Yeah.
I get that all the time. Miss Liz, you should do it this way. You should, you know what, don't be shitting on Miss Liz. If you
Mhm.
want to do it, you're more than welcome to do it. I'm not stopping you. Miss Liz is going to do Miss Liz and you do you. you know
Yeah.
well, I'm
Yeah.
going to support you and you support me. That's all I'm asking.
I just wrote an article yesterday called Being Seen, Heard, and Understood, because that's what we all want as who we are, as opposed to, and also I had written one recently called Do I Care Enough to Risk Losing You? Because being ourselves is an act of courage. It really isn't easy if there are people that have certain expectations of us. So I think it's one of the benefits of getting older is you finally get to the point where you say it's too stressful trying to be what other people want. And I really feel more and more free as I develop that self-acceptance, not so much looking at for it outside.
Yeah. So I want to get into, we're here today for LifeWork Systems. So where did that all come from and how did it start?
When I was in my early 20s and I was raising children, stumbled upon a psychology model by the work of Alfred Adler. And for those of your listeners who don't know much about him, he was around during Freud and Jung, but he didn't get as much press. But one of the things that I really believe, and I read a book about him about 5 years ago, where the authors in Japan said he was at least 100 years ahead of his time. And I felt that way when I first heard about him because he's the one who founded the words inferiority complex, which is very much like what Brene Brown does on shame and vulnerability, only he was 100 years ahead of her. And if you really understand what causes people to feel inferior and what it costs our world and what it costs individuals and groups, we would never go for win-lose. We just wouldn't. And our world hasn't really been ready for win-win. In fact, even today, I believe there's a kind of a battle between people who want win-win and people who want to hold on to win-lose with a death grip because they're afraid they're going to lose something. So when I recognized Adler's work, he also said that we need to be concerned about how we use our personal power and that we use it with consideration for what it causes other people. And how to develop as an individual as well. His psychology was called individual psychology. So as I was learning this for how to parent my children, I felt like it was also reparenting me. And I learned a lot of unconventional practices. So by the time my kids were 4 or 5 years old, they all knew how to run a family meeting. And we learned alternatives to punishment and permissiveness and all kinds of things. And so it was healing my own childhood, which was fairly normal, but yet whose is really normal, you know?
Right?
So I'm reading a book right now called The Myth of Normal. And the author said, we're so inundated with the conditioning we have that we can't even see how harmful it is. And how what we think is normal is actually a cause for a lot of the problems we're having, even with, stress and anxiety and depression and ADHD. And a lot of things are coming out of the amount of domination and kind of coercive practices that we have even in parenting and in schools, and then we continue them in workplaces. So I became a parent educator in the 80s, and then I always had this vision of how do I bring this out to the larger community, because here I was, this outlier mother who wasn't rewarding my kids for reading books and things like that. And I wanted to go into schools and work with the parents, the teachers, the administrators, and the students all simultaneously. So one of the things that happened early days for me, because my company's in our 21st year, is I wrote a vision for that. And one of the school districts, I just stopped by one day and this woman says to me, what would you do if money was no issue? And I said, oh, that's easy. I wrote that down in a vision. And she says, here's a $300,000 grant application. I like what you just shared, and I'm hearing good things about your work. So if you want to write it, it's due in 2 days. And if I like it, I'll sign off on it. And that's what happened, because we're a for-profit company. So I could have never done that by myself. And so I just think sometimes when you're really aligned with a mission and a vision, and you just kind of allow yourself to really, describe it, it can become manifested whether you were even looking for how it was going to get manifested. So not only did that happen where we worked in multiple schools, multiple years, but we also ended up with an $800,000 school reform project a couple years later, because the city of St. Louis was collecting tax dollars for kids. They had a Proposition K for kids. And we helped some inner city high schools help more high school students stay in school and graduate, because they had a really high number of kids that dropped out.
Yeah.
And at the same time that we were doing school reform work, we were also working in corporations and healthcare and nonprofits. And it just kind of happened that way. So we go in and out of, doing work with parents, teachers, and schools, and then also within all these other settings, because good human systems are good human systems.
But I really like the name of the business, LifeWork Systems, because
I appreciate you saying that.
Life work.
Well, we say that, systems that make life work, but our parent company is actually Expanding Human Potential, which is also a great name. But we wanted people to think of systems, because systemic change is really what will make the difference.
Yep.
And so it's a little bit technical compared to Expanding Human Potential, but we wanted systems in the name for that reason. And if you don't take a systems approach, you're not going to have the kind of scalable change that you need, that I believe we need right now in the world.
Absolutely. And I love conversations like this. I love deep, strong teas, because we need to have conversations about systems, about society, about programs. not just build them, but talk about them and understand the meaning behind why the systems are being built, you know?
Yes. Well, what's interesting about it, I don't know if you know this or not, because in our one of our temperament models that we use, I'm a particular type of temperament, and only 8% of the population are systems developers. All of us can appreciate a system. Like, we all know if we didn't have a satellite system, we wouldn't be able to speak on our cell phones or, you know, have our internet connections and so on. But most people don't know how to actually envision and innovate and build a system. I happen to have the kind of temperament that is a system builder for human systems. If I didn't have that kind of direction, I would probably build some other type of system, like an accounting system. So I find that that is a helpful thing for us all to know, because most of us don't realize that the systems thinkers are the kind of the ones that are looking at the whole puzzle and all the pieces that belong in that puzzle. I would bet maybe you could be a systems developer as well, just from your interest in it.
Yeah, I really like digging deep and understanding things. When I don't understand things, I have a lot of questions, and I tell my kids all the time, ask questions. There's no wrong question. If you don't ask the question, you'll never get the answer anyway.
Yes, completely agree. Completely agree. In fact, our mentoring, when we work with clients and we have a pretty comprehensive way we help them to adopt a particular model, it's very Socratic, which most people know Socrates was a philosopher that asked questions in order to pull the wisdom from the people.
Yep.
And that's really our process, because many, many people have awareness of things, but they don't know how to shift that awareness into managing something. And that's really emotional and social intelligence, is going from self-awareness and social awareness into self-management and relationship management. And most people don't know how to do that shift.
Yep.
And they're used to being told how to do it, as opposed to asking the right questions so that they do it.
Yeah. And I think it's deeply important that we get it out there for the listeners that are tuning in, and the ones that will be listening to the replay later. You know, ask questions, get involved. And, you know, that's the only way we're going to create a difference and the ripple effect is if we start reaching out. You know, you go to a seminar, or you go to a conference, and you're sitting there the whole time and you're like, oh, I don't know about this. Like, I'm not understanding. Instead of just saying, you know what, I'm not understanding what you're saying. Can you get more into detail? You're not going to hurt anybody by saying that. If the presenter, you're a professional presenter, Judy, if somebody in the audience would say, you know what, I'm not getting it. Can you get a little deeper? I'm sure you would be honored to reach deeper.
I absolutely love that. And I think a lot of people are afraid to ask questions. They're afraid of looking like, you know, they're assuming everyone else understands. And it's really a mistake, because usually if they're asking a question, someone else in the room is also struggling with that as well. So I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, because we always wait for that one person to ask the question. It's just like in school, right? When you're in school and the teacher says, does everybody understand? Everybody's all quiet.
Right.
You know, who's the one that's going to break the bubble and ask that question that the whole class wants to be asking?
Yes.
You know, I've learned over the years through my challenges and through my healing, you know, ask the questions, express that you don't understand or that you do understand, and it intrigues you and it wants you to ask more deeper questions, you know?
Yeah. I mean, two thoughts come to me when I think about the idea of questions, not only the way you're describing them, like be curious and be willing to learn and grow and be vulnerable by asking, but two things. One is questions, the right kind of questions, are incredibly powerful. We're big believers on not necessarily asking why and who as much as what and how, because that allows people to receive responsibility and pick it up. And the other thing is, we teach, one of the things we teach in a year-long process, it's just one of over 30 tools, is called appreciative inquiry. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, Liz. Have you?
No, I haven't.
So appreciative inquiry is super powerful. If I were to say to you, how are you today, Liz? You might say, oh gosh, I have a headache, or I had a flat tire, or I'm fine. But if I said, what's the best thing that happened to you today? That causes you to go into a section of your mind of all the good things that have happened and then prioritize which is the best. It's a totally different way of questioning. So if you were going, let's say you were going to an appreciative inquiry therapist for a marriage, and I'm just making this up. An appreciative inquiry therapist would say, I know you're here because you have some issues and problems, but before we get started, tell me the stories about when you were most in love. What were you thinking about each other? What were you feeling? What were you saying? And now tell me what is working in your life. What's working in your marriage? Oh, you parent really well together. Oh, you're great on finances. Tell me those stories. Now tell me the story of what your marriage would look like at its best if you were able to overcome these challenges. Tell me those stories. It puts everybody in a totally different mindset than coming in and complaining about each other. And that's an example. And I honestly believe that if we asked appreciative questions, we wouldn't have people going in the United States going towards autocratic strongman mentality, because a lot of people want to give up on democracy because there's a lot of negative questions that slow things down. But if we were all creating from these more positive questions about what works, what could work, what has worked, I think it would be a much faster process to be democratic, for example.
Yeah. I find in the last couple of years, not even with COVID, and it doesn't even have to do with COVID, I just find like the whole world, not just US, not Canada, the whole world has just become so negative and so defensive. My way is the right way. You're, we've been divided. Why not just start getting positive and start asking those right questions and come together, unify each other?
Well, you're describing what we say is when people are activated in feeling inferior, they go into those internal struggles where they feel stress and anxiety and depression and disengagement, and I'm going to quiet quit and shut down and all those things. But between people, what it looks like is that I'm right, you're wrong. I'm going to cancel you if I don't agree with you. I'm going to do all kinds of isms on you because I'm not feeling good about myself. The primary question we have in our work is if inferiority complex is the underlying cause of all struggles, including war, including all misbehavior. If that's the root cause, what do we need to do to help people and what's the antidote to inferiority complex?
Yeah.
And yet most people don't want to look at inferiority complex. Do you know Brene Brown's work?
Yes, I follow her quite close.
So she said in one of her workshops that she gets invited all over the world to speak, but people will often say to her, don't talk. How about you not talk about, you're so funny and you're so smart, Brene, but how about you not talk about that shame stuff? It's a little dark and it makes people uncomfortable. And her response is, until we deal with this shame that people have and how to overcome it in our society, the rest of it's pointless. That's what she said. And it's her number one platform. Well, that was Adler's number one platform. That's been my number one platform. In fact, when you were asking me for some T words, I thought, I could say troublemaker because
we all have a little bit of trouble in us. Like, if we're being transparent, we all have a little trouble in us. We're human beings, right?
As John Lewis said, good trouble, because disruption is trouble to a lot of people. Right. But it is necessary to disrupt the status quo. And I think that's, what's going on with people is we're not asking the right questions because it makes people uncomfortable.
Yeah. A lot of people come to me and they say, and Judy, they tell me, Miss Liz, don't talk about that. It makes me uncomfortable. And I'm like, well, you know what? This is who Miss Liz is. I'm sorry. If it makes you uncomfortable, guess how I'm feeling because you don't want to listen to the uncomfortable.
Yes.
We can't get comfortable until we get uncomfortable.
Yes. In fact, if anything, when somebody says don't talk about that, it's probably a clue that you're onto something.
Right? And I'm like, like, why don't you want me to talk about this? Is it because it might be a trigger for you? It might, it might be something that you haven't dealt with, and I tell people I do everything uncomfortable. I just try it. And if it works, it works. If it fails, it fails. Do I get upset when I fail? Of course I do. I'm a human being, but at least I try. And that's this is what this platform is for. It's to show people that you can make a difference by just taking an hour of your time for another human being. That's all I'm doing.
Yes. And that's really what my article on being seen, heard, and understood is. It's about presence and being moved by people and being able to be affected and to be able to disclose how you feel. And that's not easy for most people.
No.
They think it means they have to spill their guts. No, it doesn't. It means that in our work, we talk about 4 core needs, which are the opposite of the inferiority complex. One of them is misunderstood a lot, but it's the primary reason I do this work. So the 4 core needs are to feel empowered, lovable, connected, and contributing. And we all have those needs. So lovable is not the same as people needing to feel loved by others. Although feeling lovable is a feeling when somebody's doing a particular loving thing, but it's not saying things to you, giving things to you, or doing things for you. It's witnessing you and allowing yourself to be moved by this other person in a place of appreciation and delight. And when you do that for another person, they feel seen, heard, and understood. And most people are not great at doing that because it feels passive to them. But it's absolutely essential. And then the other one out of those four that kind of gets lost is we all need to contribute. But because we feel so inferior, we don't want to look like we ever need anybody's contribution. And so we sort of rob each other of being able to be helpful to one another.
Yeah.
And we wait until there's a crisis and then everybody jumps in. But it shouldn't have to be that we can only contribute when there's a crisis.
Well, I want to really thank you for saying that, because we really need to get that message out there. You don't have to wait till it gets to the part where we need aftercare programs and aftercare help, and look at the prevention that we can create, the prevention programs we can make if we paid attention and we actually said, you know what, I'm not going to wait until that person has a crisis. That person is slowly falling. How can I help that person?
Well, and
how can I help that business?
Actually always a little bit easier because we like to give better than receive. There's even that saying, it's better to give than receive. And I wrote an article, is it really? Not really. Because the reason the contribution is a problem is not just that we don't jump in before it's a crisis, but we don't ask others to help us before
exactly.
It's a crisis. And when we take away incentives and rewards from people, I remember there was a school principal and he was like, well, what am I going to do if I can't bribe the parents to come to parent-teacher night with a steak dinner, And I said, ask them to all bring something. Ask them to bring a quote. Ask one of them to bring a story of success about one of their students. Ask somebody to bring a bottle of soda. People love to be contributing. Don't give to them to bribe them. Give to them in a way where they feel belonging and significance in the community. And it was like a completely reversal of what he was thinking. To think about that contributing thing that we all have, where we want to be able to support.
Yeah. And if we're the one always giving, then everyone expects us to give it, right?
Yes.
And then when we can't give it because we're burnt out because we've been giving and giving and giving, then everybody's like, well, no, you're the giver. You got to do it. Well,
it's so true. And that happens in a lot of organizations because the leaders, they have that complex of a larger than life hero. A real leader develops leadership in others.
Yes.
That's why we had our kids, when my kids were little, my first four, by the time the oldest was like 12 and the youngest was like 6, they would all go to the grocery store and do all the family shopping for a week. Now, back then it was safe. We could drop them off. There wasn't worries about them getting kidnapped, although who would kidnap 4 kids? And we trained them. We trained them in how to pick things out, how to use a list and check things off, how to use a little clicker, because back then they didn't have cell phones, and then how to call us, from the payphone. And what they felt was this sense of empowered, lovable, connected, and contributing. So we went out of our way to have faith in them.
Yep.
And to develop them. And most people don't realize how much more capable everyone is than we think they are. And so I don't remember exactly what you just said that led to that, but that's kind of the idea, is how do you transfer responsibility to other people? Oh, I know what it was. You'll burn out if you're a leader that doesn't develop other leaders. You're going to burn out if you're a larger than life hero, but you don't really develop others.
Yeah. Well, and leadership is not about the person in the lead, The leader should be sitting in the back sometimes and watching the team and saying, you know what, I'm going to give you the afternoon to show me a little bit. If you're always in the front, how do you know what's happening in the back?
Yes.
How do you know what's going on with your team if you're just looking forward and you don't see the people in the back? I love sitting in the back. Like I like to be the watcher. I like to analyze the room and just kind of pick up. And then when it's time to come to the front, I'll come to the front. But I like to watch, and I like to just analyze the body language and just when you go to a conference, I like to watch the audience. I'll watch the speaker, but I also see if the audience is actually engaged or, Like, are they getting bored? Are they like, oh, it's just another one
Yeah.
like
Well, what's
this?
interesting about that is even the most interesting speaker, if you're sitting in a passive way too long, your brain starts going on autopilot, kind of like a screensaver. So what I do when I present is every 5 minutes or so, I have them turn to the person next to them and share something that they just learned about in the presentation. And what it does is it resets the brain, but it also engages them, and they're always plugged in. I learned that a while ago about neuroscience. Here's something that you might find interesting about the whole thing about asking questions or engaging people. This is one of my favorite stories. Is it okay if I tell you a quick story?
Absolutely. It's your time, girl. Go ahead.
I'm saying it's quick, but I don't think it's too long. But we use it a lot of times when we even open a big conference with a bunch of executives. But it's an actual story from our school work. And it happened to be a school where one of the teachers learned about our work, and she was the only one in her school doing what we call a responsibility-based culture model. Okay. And the whole idea of it is, how do I help my kids in my classroom feel empowered, lovable, connected, and contributing? And she was doing classroom meetings, and she had an 8th grade class. And so she called me one day and she said, I know my job is to develop them into leaders, but sometimes I don't always know how to do that. Would you sit in on one of our classroom meetings so that I can see how that's done when I get stuck? And I said, sure. So I came one day, and one of the boys in her class came in at the beginning of the classroom meeting, and he says, I've got something to put on the agenda. I'm being bullied by my homeroom teacher, because the homeroom teacher wasn't in this program, didn't have this whole notion. And so she says, well, put it on the agenda. So when it was his turn to talk, he said, here's what's going on. We've been given this new thing in the morning, along with like the Pledge of Allegiance. It's called the Peace Pledge. And we have to put our hands on our hearts and pledge that we're going to use our words and our actions for peace in the school. And he said, I don't really have a problem with the pledge, but the problem I have is that the teacher did this to us, and real angry and serious said, if I catch any of you not doing this pledge, I'm going to give you a detention. Which, Liz, isn't that kind of ironic? It's all about peace, but I'm going to use a sledgehammer on you. So he said, I just don't think it's right that she's bullying us about it. And I said, I happen to agree with you. Well, first she said, the teacher said, Judy, how would you help him? Like, can you show me how you would help him? Because she couldn't see it. And so I said, do you want peace in the school? And he said, well, yeah. And I said, okay, good. I said, do you want peace with the teacher who's bullying you? I didn't even pull any punches. I said, she's bullying you. Do you want peace with her? And he goes, well, yeah, I guess so. I said, okay. Are you willing to look at where you're doing war with her? And he's like, me? I'm the one being bullied. He got really defensive. And I said, yeah, but you're the one saying you want peace with her and in the school, and you're the one asking for help. She's not here in the room. And he said, yeah, okay. And I said, do you ever say bad things about her behind her back? And he said, well, yeah, I hate her. And I said, hate and gossip, anything warlike about that? And
Right?
he goes, yeah, I guess, And I said, do you ever try to go to her when things are calm and have a really reasonable, peaceful kind of conversation? And he said, no, we're all afraid of her. And I said, did you know that when you're afraid of anyone, you're in attack mode? And he said, what do you mean? And I said, when a dog comes racing up to you and it's baring its teeth and it's growling at you, if you become more afraid, does that dog become more hostile or less hostile? And he said, more hostile. And I said, exactly. I said, why? He goes, I don't know. I never really thought about it. And I said, the reason the dog becomes more hostile is when you're afraid of it, he knows that you've got him in the monster box. You are holding him as the enemy, and he's going to return the favor. I said, so now do you see that you have been in war by gossip, hate, and attack through fear? What do you want now that you see that? And he said, well, now I want to go to her and have a peaceful conversation, but I'm not quite sure how to do it. And I said, well, isn't it great that you have 20 other classmates and a teacher, and you have a coach in the room right now, and you guys have time to practice it? And what I thought was so powerful, Liz, is that other kids started saying, I'll go with you. I've been at war too, and I didn't know it. And the teacher said to me, you can see I love my students and I love this kind of thing. But I realized at the end of the year, I want to quit teaching and come work with you in school reform, because I walk around this school where nobody else is doing this. And I see all these signs about responsibility and respect and accountability. And it's like saying math is crucial and not having a math class. And she said, so to me, we're doing a disservice by teaching them reading, writing, and arithmetic, but not how to manage relationships, even with authority figures. And when I tell this to executives, I'll say, you might be wondering, why is she telling us a story about an 8th grader? But it's what we all want in our workplaces.
Yep.
We want people that can go and work things out and not have to be tattling to anybody and not have to be the victim. And if I had been more conventional, I would have said, oh, you poor thing, we'll go and take care of that mean, big bad bully. But what I did instead was ask him questions that put him in touch with his own power. Yep. And his own ability to influence and his own ability to choose his intention. And so that's kind of along the lines of the Socratic questioning that we do.
And I think it's deeply important that, sometimes an outsider comes in and a mediator or a coach and shows us a different way of looking at the situation, instead of coming in and all on attack. It's like you said, when you're on attack, you just go on defense. And that's what I've been seeing around the world is everyone's on defense. Like, how do we fix everything if we're just attacking everybody?
Right. And I think most people don't actually have the understandings and the tools to fix things. Yeah. That's what I really believe. And I think a lot of people think they're already supposed to know how to do that. In fact, sometimes when we work in companies, they'll say, well, how come these people don't know how to behave with each other? Well, it doesn't matter how come. The fact of it is they got to learn somewhere. Yeah. And if you want a healthy workplace, then you're going to have to be the one that invests in them getting these skills, because otherwise they're going to continue doing what they've been doing, and it's not effective most places.
Yeah. I'm learning so much from you this afternoon. I really like deep conversations, and I really like to get the information out there because we don't have enough awareness on topics like this and proper leadership programs. There are so many people that use the word leadership and have no idea how to lead.
I know. And in fact, in our model, leadership is everyone being taught to be a leader. That 8th grader, my kid's learning how to grocery shop or lead a family meeting. Most people mean leadership development of the titled leaders. That's not the only people that need to be. That's like saying we can only give cell phones to the titled leaders. No, we be our, personal computers or something.
Yeah. Well, we're dividing again, right? And I find that titles are being thrown out and words are being thrown out that they don't even understand. And I like that you use that word loved, because a lot of people use that word, I love you, or I love what you do. And then you ask them, why do you love what I do? And they have no answer to it. They're just like, I just love it.
Okay. Well, what's funny about that, Liz? When I was first working with a marketing company, and I told them our mission was to create a world where all people love their lives, one of the marketing people said, business owners don't care if their employees love their lives. And I said, then I don't want to work with those leaders because, and
see, you're like me. That's how I am. Yeah,
even the ones that don't
love for anybody,
even the ones that don't care, they're being forced to care because so many people are saying, I don't want to put up with this anymore.
Yep.
And so, regardless if they're doing it for their bottom line or not, they better care because people really realize they don't need to, tolerate that. So.
I find in today's world, we're using a lot of words that we really don't understand.
Right. Even the word culture. I always say to people, it's like the word parenting. You could have 10 parents in a room and they'd all have a different idea of what healthy parenting is. And the same is true of culture. Yep. And one of the things that you just touched upon was we have all of these separations in the levels. When we go in and we do a guided culture transformation, we use an immersive process, which is based in best practices from education, and I can explain that if you want. But one of the things we do is we break people into small groups as part of our immersion process. But we insist that the projects have a range from CEO to frontline staff, and that the small groups have that range. And a lot of times the senior executives say, oh, we don't want to put the leaders with the frontline staff because some of our managers are kind of rough around the edges. And I say, you need to do that because you need to break the barriers. When you have a company that has all this hierarchy, sometimes you need that for the job skills. But when it comes to being human with one another, you've got to level the playing field. And your people need to see. So just like we did the family meeting where our kids took turns rotating the leadership with the adults, we do that in these small groups that we do every month. The CEO might lead one month, and then the next month, the receptionist is in the group and she's leading or he's leading. And it's important to break down some of those artificial barriers on purpose.
And I think it really opens up the eyes of getting everybody seen and heard, like you said, the
Mhm.
article, every level of the
Yes.
company and the business is getting seen and heard, not just the top leaders.
Yes. And also you need to develop the leadership and the followership in all of the people. Like I'm a good strong leader. You can kind of tell I'm a dominant personality.
Yeah.
I had to learn how to be a good follower to a 4-year-old who was leading a meeting because I was tempted to steamroll that child, And so sometimes people are in need of being flexible to be the good follower that supports the leader. And they have to know how to lead when they're the appropriate person to jump into the breach. And if they don't know both, they're going to stay stuck in these very I don't know, like stereotypes of
Yeah.
who they think they are, and it's just not very agile.
Well, and some of us, when we're put into these leader positions, we're not really ready to be leaders,
That's
because
right, because
then
we haven't even been trained what real leadership development is, and real how do you empower, and how, like that student I was showing that teacher, this is how you create another leader.
Yeah.
But because otherwise she would have been the person that goes and handles it instead of teaching him how to handle it. And she was interested in learning how it was just new for her to learn how to transfer that responsibility.
And I think it's really deeply important that we open the eyes to different, that's what tea time is about, is being different, just being yourself. If you learn a little different way than someone else, that's okay. We shouldn't be knocking people down because they're learning it a different way. The conversation,
Yeah.
it might impact them in a different way. You see a 6, I see a 9, but neither one of us is wrong. We just see that at a different angle.
Yes. Yes. And you don't really get that unless you create an environment where there's a lot of trust and a lot of ability to really hear one another and share ideas. When I mentioned that we use an immersive process in what we do, that's actually sometimes a very difficult thing for us because it requires a multiplicity of ways to engage in what you're learning. And in what happened in education was they found that if you just stand in front of a classroom of students of any age and you just lecture to them, they only learn what they learn long enough to take the test, maybe a few months after. They don't retain that information. It's not even really that relevant to them much of the time. But what they found is if you send a student home with a packet or a video and they have to fill out a worksheet and workbooks, and then they come to school and they have peer discussion and their teacher's there to kind of just support that discussion, and they talk about the relevance and what they understand and how they would apply it, they found that they retain that information. So what we do is we kind of do that on steroids. We know that we're appealing to the kinesthetic learner, the visual learner, the auditory learner, the one that has to hear it multiple times in order to absorb it, to try it on, to practice it. We have like 11 touch points for content before we even end a culture transformation process. And is it okay if I tell you another story?
Sure, go ahead. I love stories. We get so much from a story sometimes.
I know. Well, this is a true story. Everything I tell you is always a true story. So we had this company that has 550 people. And the guy is the CEO. He knew the Adlerian psychology, so he was already on board right away. But when he found out about this immersive process, he's like, I don't know about that. That's a lot. I don't know if I want my executives to have to, because what we do in the immersive process is people watch an individual module, they fill out a workbook, they fill out a reflective survey, then they meet in small groups where the levels are mixed, like I was saying, and they take turns rotating the leadership, and they have to be prepped for that. And then they go and do mentoring pairs. And sometimes it's like the CEO mentors the receptionist and then she mentors him back. And so it's very different. It's not counseling and coaching. It's a really interesting. And then we help the organization to integrate with their learning. So there's a lot. It's about 4.5 hours a month. Wow. And so he said, what I want to do first is I just want you to take all 52 of my leaders, everyone from supervisor up, and just do kind of a skim, a review of all these concepts and tools that you do in a year. I want you to do it in 6 months, every other week for 2 hours. And I just want you to lead discussion and presentation. I said, okay, I'll do that, but here's what you're going to lose, and he's like, okay, I'm okay with that. I don't want them mentoring. I don't want them doing homework. I don't want them, So one of the tools that we taught is one of 2 tools that is designed to eliminate or reduce gossip. So Liz, if I was doing this tool, it's called the Mind Trust. And the other tool is called healthy venting, which most people don't do healthy venting. They just call it venting, but it's really gossip. So Mind Trust is a commitment that we ask people to think about reflect on, write about, and make to one another. So if I was doing it to you, Liz, I would say, I'm going to promise you 4 things. I commit to you that I won't say bad things about you behind your back. So I'm doing this one-on-one. I commit to you that I will come to you if I have a problem with you and work it out with you. I commit that if anyone else comes and starts to say bad things about you to me, I'll politely stop them. I might offer them the healthy venting tool, but I won't let them tear you down to me. And the 4th commitment is I'm going to try to get that person to go to you and work it out so that they don't hold on to that grudge or take it to other people. So when I presented that to everybody from C-suite to supervisors, I said, what do you guys think about that tool? And they said, oh, we think that's great. We're going to, we love that. And I said, would you all go within the next 2 weeks to all 52 of each other, do it on Zoom, do it in person, and make that commitment? And they're like, yes, we'll do that. So at the end of the 6 months, one of these leaders is over 8 other leaders. And he calls me and he says, we've gotten so much information and so many tools from you in 6 months, but we're still having a lot of interpersonal problems. We're really not sure what we're doing with all these tools. Could you come in for a couple of days and just guide us in how to apply everything? Because we're not really getting better with each other. And I said, well, I'm going to be talking to your CFO today. I'll find out if there's budget for you. So when I called her, now this is where it gets kind of interesting. She was also in this training, right? The CFO. She says to me, oh, he definitely needs your help. He was at a meeting with his leaders and he was saying so many bad things about me that they came and told me all the bad things he was saying. And I said, so did you ask them if they stopped him? Because don't they have a mind trust with you? She goes, oh, I didn't even think about it. I said, I guess you didn't ask them if they went to him and said, we have a problem with what you're doing. Because they did have a problem with him, but they didn't come to him. They went to her. And she said, no, I didn't think to ask that. And I said, once you knew he was saying bad things about you and you had a problem with that, did you go and talk to him? And because you have a mind trust with him. And she says, no, I actually went and tattled on him to his boss. And then I found out his boss was at the meeting and he didn't stop him either. And then she goes, what is wrong with all of us? Isn't that hilarious? I actually wrote an article called A Fool with a Tool is Still a Fool. Because
Right?
we grab these tools like it's going to make us, So what I said to her is, there's nothing wrong with you. This is why we do an immersive process. Because when I gave you that tool, it was like I gave you all a shiny tennis racket.
Yep.
And y'all thought it made you a tennis player.
Yep.
And I said, but you don't become a tennis player unless you watch some games, you understand the ins and outs of all of it, you get out on the court, you practice it, you might get some coaching, you fall in love with it, and you develop muscle memory. Because if you sat down with the homework that they didn't want to do, it would ask you to think about, could you really go to everyone and work it out directly with them? At the early stages, most people would say, no. What if it's my boss and I'm afraid I'll get fired? Or I have no idea how to do that. It always blows up in my face when I try to deal with someone directly. Or maybe I can't commit to not talking about everyone behind their back and saying bad things because I kind of like saying bad things about John or Mary over here. And so it requires reflection, writing it down, discussing it, practicing it, then going and seeing if you're really ready to do it. When we do this in groups live, about 50% of the time, they're not ready to do it right away. And the goal is to help them get all the skills and the trust built so that they can eventually really mean those 4 commitments. And so isn't that, that's what we struggle with. Oh, we just want a fast food solution.
Yes.
You won't get them there.
Yeah. Well, that's it, right? Everybody wants instant impact, and it's
I don't want to put in the time.
Yep.
Exactly.
They just want the fast food. They don't want to take the time to make that home cooked meal,
Right.
I say it all the time. A lot of people are like, Miss Liz, how do you do? I take my time and take ownership, take accountability. If you make something and you do it wrong, take accountability. Nobody's going to love you any less. They might talk about you and gossip and do all of that.
How can we possibly learn all of these things if we've never been taught them like we should have been taught them, like reading, writing, and arithmetic? And we weren't. Much of it we were taught wrongly. The conditioning that we have been provided is the biggest part of the problem.
That's right. Like if we're not taught properly, and the right way, it's like asking the right questions. Everyone says, oh, there's no wrong question. Yes, there is wrong questions. When it's nonsense and it's just continuing the pattern and the cycles, those are wrong questions.
Right. And there's also wrong systems. Like one of the things that we say is the biggest cause of inferiority complex are 4 ways that we control people. And we do it from infancy. We do it by being domineering in a way like do it or else, right? Autocratic, scaring people into doing the right thing. We do it by dangling carrots. We do it by saying, I'm so disappointed in you, or I'm so proud of you, which causes them to be people pleasers and not feel like they can ever question authority, and bring a new idea forward. And then we do it by enabling them. If I had said to that 8th grade student, oh, you poor thing, we don't expect you to go handle that, I would have been enabling him instead of empowering him. And it creates an entitlement mentality. So people are, when they start to, Adler had a phrase called spitting in your soup. And what he was basically saying is sometimes there's something that looks nutritious and has been sold to be. How many people have you heard say, well, I was spanked and it didn't hurt me? You know, because they're holding on to the soup.
Yep.
Oh, I have to give my parents a steak dinner or they won't show up to the meetings. That's just your belief system that you have to externally motivate them. So most people don't even know that those need to be dismantled. And then what do you replace them with? Because if you don't replace them with something better, they're going to go back to what they know. You know,
where it's comfortable, right?
where it's comfortable, where even society is saying, but those work and they work so fast. Well, yeah, it works like a gun to your head, or if I give you a bribe, but it doesn't develop you well. Yeah. It doesn't create your own internal motivation. Yeah. So it's not only the questions we ask, it's the systems that we just buy into. I recently called them sacred cows, and I found out that's not a politically correct thing to say because of the people from India, because they do actually have sacred cows. But my point in that is we don't like to challenge the things that we've done for centuries.
Yeah. So true. Well, our hour is running really quick, and I'm getting so much points and tools. And, you know, we're giving the tools, but until you really take the time to understand the tools, they're only tools.
Well, and I would say if you don't have the mindset shift, the tools you really will be a fool with a tool.
Yeah.
And that's why what I think a lot of people do that are into that immediate gratification is they grab a tool like the Mind Trust and they think that's going to solve everything. And then they say later, well, I learned all that stuff in that workshop and it didn't work. Well, it didn't work because you didn't also shift your mindset.
Yeah.
And so you're absolutely right. And I think it just takes people a while to realize that you don't get it. Anything worthwhile is going to take a while.
Yeah. So we're almost at the hour. So I want to get into your tea before we wrap it up, because I do want to know what Judy's tea is, because I'm really curious about your tea, because I'm learning so much from you this afternoon. And I really think that it needed to happen this way. The universe needed to make us take that extra hour, because I feel that there's a lot of deep information here. There's a lot of tools. There's a lot of tips. And there's a lot of reflection in today's tea. So I want to know what your tea is. If I give you the word TEA, what words do you have for me?
Well, do you just want one, right?
One for each letter.
Oh, I was thinking I needed 3 that were starting with a T.
No, one for each letter.
So the T that I didn't yet do the E. So we'll figure it out, the E and A as we go. But the T, I would say my most important one is trust building.
Okay.
Trust builder, because in our culture model, we have a house picture and the foundation is trustworthiness. And there are 8 behaviors that build trust. And they are things like being honest and straightforward and disclosing and respectful and receptive and following through on commitments and seeking excellence and all of those kinds of things. And so what that means is if I was in your life all the time and I would, like right now, I feel like I have a 10 with you. That means we have nothing unresolved. We're good with each other. I actually feel beyond that, because you can have a 10 and not be friends with somebody, but you just don't have anything unresolved. Yeah. So if we say that's foundational, that means if you're in an environment and you don't have a 10 with someone, you go and fix that right away. Because if you don't, it goes from a 10 to a 9 to an 8 to down to a 1.
Yeah, it just keeps going lower.
Big blame fest. And then it's all about this person's breaking all the rules, but I'm the saint. And and it just gets really, really difficult to fix. So trust is huge in this model. If you're not responsible to build trustworthiness with people, you're actually setting your dynamics up in a way that is going to have all kinds of energy sucking and negativity going on because of you making that sort of a nice to have, but not a need to have. So that would be my T. if I had to pick one, because I had 3 words with T.
Well, let's do something different. We don't need to always have the TEA. Like Miss Liz likes to switch it up. And I love when my guests, like, sometimes it's meant to be. So give
Well,
me the other
I
2
appreciate
Ts.
that, because I'm getting freaked out thinking, what's the
I like doing different. Everyone knows Miss Liz kind of just whoop, 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 whoop. So I'd be honored to have the other 2 Ts.
Okay. Well, one of them is the word transformation, because I always think of it this way. And I tell this story. When a caterpillar gets so full of itself, and it sounds terrible to say it, but they're kind of like an eating machine, right? They're just eat, 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 eat. Eventually they get kind of bloated, and they form they hang from the tree, and they form the chrysalis. And if you were to poke a hole in that chrysalis about, a certain period of time into it, it would look terrible, because it's a black soupy mess, because the caterpillar cells are being inundated by what's called imaginal cells. And that's a real term. That's what the biologists call these dormant cells within in a caterpillar. And the caterpillar doesn't like it, because it feels like it's being invaded. And it is. I mean, it's a disruptive process. If you didn't know there was going to be a butterfly on the other end, it would look like a disaster.
Yeah.
And even as it strengthens this new form that it's in, you can't cut it open, because it won't be strong enough to fly. So what happens is, we always tell people that transformation is like that. It is not always a comfortable process, because you have to dismantle things that you think were like your stability, your security. And I had a woman that was in the 9th month of our 12-month process. And we happened to talk about the imaginal cells in this particular session. And at the end of every session, the group leader always says, I want everybody to share at least one aha. And this woman said, I realized that I came in as a caterpillar, but I'm now an imaginal cell. And she said, I was so upset when they told me I had to do this. I was like, I just got hired. I have to learn all these other things. Why do I have to do this too? And she said, then I started to open to it. And I realized that this is going to help me with the people I serve, with my coworkers, with my family. And I came around, but it took me 9 months. And that's kind of a really good process to say transformation doesn't always look and feel good in the beginning, because it's a complete metamorphosis if you're doing it the way that we would suggest transformation happen. And so there's kind of a need for faith and seeing the higher vision. And we always start with the end in mind, with the top person, is helping them have a vision for what do they want at the end of this transformation process, and what are the biggest things that they want to cause, and what are the biggest core values that they have to cause what they want to cause. And that aligns people in a way that is life-giving. So that's my second T word, was transformation. And then, do you want another one?
Yes, I do. I want 3 words.
Okay. So the other one I thought of was thought leadership, because I think thought leaders are always a little bit like, you want to say, don't shoot the messenger. I had somebody say, I think you're just a little ahead of your time. Maybe you're going to be like Van Gogh, where you have to die before people realize that you did something. And I'm like, oh, God forbid. I don't want that to happen. But isn't that funny and terrible?
Right?
But I think thought leadership is something that, because so many people are afraid of change, they don't always welcome it. That's why, even though our mission is to create a world in which all people love their lives, what we want to do is fulfill that mission in partnership with like-minded, like-hearted thought leaders worldwide, change agents. Because like in our world, a good customer and a good partner is somebody who is innovative in their mindset. They're not saying, oh, we always did it this way, we have to always do it this way. They're not risk averse to some degree. They are convicted about the importance of people. People and purpose come before profit. The reality is, if people put people and purpose first, profit would follow easily. Mm-hmm. And they don't get that. They try to keep putting purpose or profit ahead. I remember one time I was talking to somebody, and this guy, he had 10 nursing homes, and they were losing $8.8 million. And I said, well, what if I could charge you $250,000 to do this transformation, and I was able to save you $2 million on your turnover problem? He's like, I don't know. We're kind of used to the 8.8 million. We don't know. Like it was like complacent about the $8.8 million loss. that is not a good client for us. We need
No.
people that are itching to improve something, that they see where the world is going, and they're not going to say, oh, we don't have to pay attention to where the world's going.
Right.
If you don't pay attention to where the world's going, you're going to be left behind.
Exactly.
And we also look for people who are willing to be such thought leaders that they say, we're going to put the time and the effort and the money into doing the change process, because we can't be successful without doing the change.
Yeah. I'm the same way. If you're comfortable being in that spot and not growing, I'm going to wish you the best and move on.
Exactly. I literally, Liz, I have 2 prayers I pray every day. One of them is release me from the need for love, approval, and acceptance from others. And it doesn't mean I don't love, approval, and acceptance, but I'm trusting, this is my faith, I'm trusting to get that from God. Because if I want it from you and I'm trying to help you, I can't be honest with you, because it's transactional if I'm trying to get something from you.
Yeah.
So I might say things and you would hate me for it, and the next day you'd love me for it. But I can't worry about that if I want to make a difference in your life, because I know that my goal is to help you love your life, even if you don't like where I'm dismantling the caterpillar. And so that's one prayer. The other prayer is, please send me the people who are partners and prospects who are ready for and hungry for this, and they just haven't known about it. Because I don't want to push any rocks up the hill. I'm not a believer that I'm here to fix or convert anyone else.
Yep.
I'm here with a solution if the right people are put in my path, because that is a God thing.
Yep.
That's providential, and that's graceful. And that's what I want, is it to be graceful.
And I'm so glad, Judy, that you put people before a profit. We really need to change that mindset, because the profit will fall once we build the relationships. Start building
100%.
relationships
Yes.
before you ask for the paycheck.
Yes. I would say people and purpose, because you can have a bunch of people, but they won't necessarily, like that homeroom teacher, she didn't have a great purpose if she's saying, we're going to create peace, I'm going to use a sledgehammer, So it is people and purpose, but I do believe profit comes so much better and so much more gracefully if we could remember that.
Yeah. Well, I really want to thank you, Judy, for joining me today on Tea Time and sharing all these cool points, and, just opening it up and sharing the stories, because, sometimes storytelling actually gives us more than just, targets and points and slideshows and stuff like that. Just having an open conversation and discussion on bringing the awareness of change, and change is uncomfortable. And I really appreciate you saying that, because I tell everybody that all the time. I don't do comfortable.
Yes.
I don't. A lot of people will say, Miss Liz, oh, I wouldn't do it. Miss Liz needs to do it that way, because that's what's going to make Miss Liz grow. It's going to be painful. I'm going to get some scars. I'm going to bleed a little, but I'm going to get it done.
I always tell people, comfort isn't your enemy. I mean, discomfort isn't your enemy. Yeah. Complacency is your enemy. And I'm not a big advocate that everything has to be painful either, but sometimes, because I think there's a mindset, no pain, no gain, and that's not always true. But if we can relax into the differentness, it doesn't have to be horrible. Yeah. It's that idea that it's going to be terrible.
Right? And I do different. I love the word different. Everyone asks me what my one word is for Miss Liz. It's different. I am different. I do different. I serve different. And I bring different. So I want to thank you, Judy, for joining me on Tea Time. And we will be back tonight for the final show at 7 p.m. with Brad Evans. I had to think for a second. And he'll be talking about the jerk stir. It's a punching bag, a coordinating punching bag. And I feel like this week's tea has been about coordination, leadership, and following directions and breaking those patterns and just going in a different direction, taking that bend in the road. I think this is what we're doing this week, is we're just doing a bunch of bends in the road and looking at things differently. And again, I want to thank you, Judy. I want to thank the supporters. I want to thank everybody who tunes in and listens to Tea Time. Share this Tea Time. Share them as many places as you can. The more we get the awareness out there, the more we make a difference. And we might just be sharing it with somebody who is actually looking for this information and doesn't know that it is out there. So again, thank you, Judy. Thank you for everyone. I will see everybody at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the last Tea Time of this week. And then we'll jump into next week. And then on the 23rd, don't forget to pay attention. All of June's guests will be released. So Miss Liz just keeps going and going and going. That's just the way I roll. I flow a strong cup of tea. And I want to really just enjoy a moment of peace and tranquility in all of the hassle and bustle and everything. But I want to get a message of teaching educational awareness to each and every one of you out there. So again, thank you everyone for tuning in to Tea Time with Miss Liz.
Thank you, Liz.